love to know from my actors and even from my audience friends, what are some ways that you investigate underneath the words of Shakespeare? How do you suss out the meaning behind this? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I use a lot of different methods, but one of my favorite is you can go online to the Oxford Dictionary, I believe. You can look up words that you don't know by their sort of time period, so you can find like, well, what would this word have meant in 1600s when Shakespeare was writing and using it, because the meaning of words changes a lot of times.
Oxford Dictionary.
Yeah, I like to use No Fear Shakespeare, which used to be 100% free resource. I don't think it's free anymore. But you can always go into a library or a bookstore and find it in print.
For me, repetition, paraphrasing, and Google. Alicia, tell us.
I believe like maybe reading it with another person to hear the words, so maybe dragging in my mom who's not really good. And like hearing the sound of the word helps me to draw a picture in my head and try to think of it in context and do kind of sort of the same things with it.
What I like to do is there are different translations, like there's the Arden translation, there's the Folger Library translation, and I like to look at all those different versions and go back through. And they, in the book, they'll have they will explain what some of the words mean, and so, and each one of those translations has a different meaning or close or the same or whatever. But I like to look at all of those.
And then do you ultimately, if they are pretty different, do you ultimately choose one, or do you?
Yeah, then I just take the one I like. Or maybe the easiest.
Laura Jo, what do you do?
Oh, goodness. I do the same thing. The first thing I do is when I'm reading, I actually read through the script. It tells you at the bottom that those are certain words that most people aren't going to necessarily know what they mean, and it tells you exactly what they mean.
Stuart?
As the expression is, there's an app for that. I have an app on my iPad called Shakespeare Pro, and it has the text as well as glossary underneath, so that you can reference some different ways that this are glossified.
Yeah, the kind of learner that I am, if I try and just read the Shakespeare, if I'm not familiar with it, I read it like this. So that is my head collapsing into sleep. So I watch a lot of different versions of it, filmed versions of it, and that's a way in for me. I also do what Leslie talked about, consulting a bunch of different written resources. And as of this moment, there's still a free resource online called Lit Charts, L-I-T Charts. I don't remember if it's a .org or .com, but if you Google Lit Charts, you will get there. And sometimes don't agree, but it can be a good starting point.
I would say I use all of the above, all of the methods, they're great. Another one that I'll just throw into the pot of amazingness is I also, when I'm going through the text or reading the play, I actually love to go on SparkNotes and get the synopsis of what's going through the scenes. Sometimes I'll do that with character to get a little deeper understanding because they tend to go in depth. But worst comes to worst, I ask my director, if I'm working with a director, if I'm really stuck, I'll be like, I really don't know what's going on here, please help me, or like fellow castmates or other artists in the community. So that's what I do.
Does anyone else have any other methods? Yeah.
I like to move. So I take the words and I either say them in my head or I move them with my mouth, but I actually physically move around with it because I start to figure out my intention based off of where my body wants to move.
Yeah, super helpful. Having like a visceral connection with the words can be really helpful.
I heard someone, Marianne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, especially if there's time for it during a staged reading, listening to all of the characters saying what they say, and if it really just sounds like Greek, just like, hey, what on earth is that? And pick the collective mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I have to say that I do the same thing, talking to colleagues, using all of the above here. just yesterday, actually, in rehearsal for As You Like It, I'm playing the character of Jaques, which has that very famous monologue, "All the world's a stage." So that's one I probably want to get right, right? Right? And this entire, so one of Jaques' lines is, at first, the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. At first, the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And one of my colleagues, one Steve Wilson, Leslie O'Carroll's husband, very, very gently said to me, I have been saying it as, at first, the infant mewing and puking in the nurse's arms. So Steve Wilson very gently corrected me, and I definitely the whole time thought that was just picturing an infant like meowing in the nurse's arm. I was like, that makes sense. Shakespeare loves like a heightened image. So I totally was
But what is mewling?
I was committed to mewing in the nurse's arms. Mewling makes way more sense than meowing in the nurse's arms. Mewling is like crying, basically just like little whining and crying. Exactly. It is not meowing. So no, don't. It's never too. It's never too late to get it totally wrong. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. And you can't be too proud. Being wrong is how we learn new things. So that was a really wonderful, and I was so grateful to my colleague for helping me out in that.
Amazing.
We're okay for time to get a couple more audience suggestions.
Great,
then we'll
thank you.
What
Well,
else?
for those who are bilingual or trilingual, I recommend to read it in the native language.
Yeah.
So, because this was written in the 16th century, the translations were much later, so it's a little bit more modern, I would imagine.
I love that, and I would think that if you have a few different languages under your belt, that also even helps with some of the words where they might have some derivations that come from those languages, and that definitely might, I bet you even have a better grasp on some things. Yeah.
I think, like, at least for me, when approaching the Shakespeare script, like, going into it acknowledging, I'm not gonna figure out every single word in here, but, like, looking at it more as, like, well, what words do I know in this? What context clues can I get from that? Like, what do the flow of conversations look like? Like, are people reacting negatively or positively to what a character is doing? I'm just, like, getting more context clues rather than being like, I have to translate every single word.
So helpful, so helpful. Context clues. What I also, and so listening to or reading beyond just your lines, right? Understanding what's being said about you, what's being said to you. Awesome, awesome. Yeah.
Kind of tagging on with what you were saying, the etymology of the word, like sometimes I'll read it like it's slang, and the slang kind of comes out because the meaning underneath it is just kind of, I don't know, just looking at it that way.
Yeah, I love that. Was there's one over here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say the opposite thing. That's amazing. And I have like the app for that, the old school app. There's a lexicon.
Yes.
That literally somebody or 1,000 people went through, did every single word in every single play, and you can look it up like, oh, in Henry V, he meant this. And in Midsummer Night's Dream, that word means this. It is amazing. And then you do all the emotional context stuff. Like, it's amazing if you don't have it.
And just
Yes.
to quickly go off of that as well, is comparison in punctuation too. That can give you so much as an actor of, can I take a pause here? Am I thinking? Shakespeare gives you so much within the text, even in the punctuation, that really going through all those different versions really help.
Shannon, for folks who wouldn't know which versions you're comparing, can you say a little bit more about that? Are you talking about like quarto versus folio, or?
I don't know.
Okay, that is the thing that we frequently do, is look at the quarto versus the folio that were, decades apart.
But I love this idea of just like nerding out, getting into every single one. I love being a little Shakespeare detective. Alicia was saying the same thing when we were first talking about that, just really getting into taking the magnifying glass. Yes.
Watching the interpretation of every production of Shakespeare I've seen,
shines a new light on each script. And so I think watching the relationships that are formed through each production really helps me understand the scripts from different angles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And different castings too.
There are a lot of nuggets left in there, and you can interpret them in different ways that shine new lights on humanity. And that's the love of Shakespeare.
Wow, such great breadth of knowledge, such wisdom in this room. Thank you for sharing.